everyone, welcome back to another video, and we are continuing on with our Lore of Hydaelyn series. If you remember last time, we ended up talking about Gridania, the city-like forest within the Twelveswood. So with that out of the way, we have the rest of the Shroud that we need to discuss. So today we're going to be going over two parts of the Shroud. We have the Central Shroud and the East Shroud. Both of them are pretty big, so I decided just to get them out of the way. So let's go ahead and just dive right on into it. Alright, so I should go ahead and mention this. I think I mentioned it last time, but the word Twelvewood is really used for the Gridanians themselves. Everyone outside Gridania just refers to it as the Black Shroud. So with the Central Shroud, it's the area of the Twelveswood that's closest to Gridania, to the city itself, and the Central Shroud is rich in water. In the north you have the Jadeite Flood, in the south you have the Twin Lakes known as the Mirror, and in its interior flow the east and west vein streams. As one might expect, the Central Shroud is home to a veritable host of flora species. So with the Central Shroud, it's actually divided into 5 different areas. We have the Jadeite Flood, the Standing Courses, Sorrel Haven, Bent Branch, and Green Tier. So let's just start from the bottom. Here we have the Jadeite Flood. The shores of the Jadeite Flood form Gridania's southern edge. Its color is a deep green, and it's a reflection of the forest's canopy shimmering upon the water's surface. Here we have just 2 specific landmarks that we really need to focus on. The first is known as Gilbert's Spire. This watchtower is named in honor of Gilbert Trueshot, a hero of Gridania in the early days of the city-state. An archer of extraordinary skill, he was the first to carry the vaunted title of God's Bow. So the title God's Bow is really only handed out to true masters of the bow. So he was considered to be the very first of the God's Bow, so I'm guessing that's how the God's Bow quiver was kind of named after him as well. And we also have what's known as the Bannock. Built around the stump of a fallen heavens pillar, the Bannock serves as training grounds for orders of the Twin Adder initiatives. There are several theories regarding to the origin of the area's name, some claiming it was taken from the hardtack issued to Grand Company recruits, others say it's diverged from the training stump's resemblance to those selfsame rations. So really the Bannock is actually just named for a really hard piece of food that the initiatives have to eat. Okay, so that's everything with the Jadeite Flood. That's everything that we have in the south that we really need to focus on. Let's go ahead and look a little bit to the northern parts here. We have the Standing Courses. So this is probably the smallest area. And when Bahamut descended upon the realm, his fiery onslaught turned the Standing Courses to ash. Hardened in the inferno, the trees now seem the withered husks of men crouched together in eternal agony. Well, that's a depressing way to look at everything, I suppose. So yes, this area used to be a very beautiful place. It used to be flourishing just like the rest of the Shroud, but it ended up being hit pretty hard when Bahamut rained his fiery hell upon Eorzea. So at this point, nothing here is green. It really looks like the entire area is dead. You can just see how destructive it was, because after 5 years, there's literally nothing here. The only landmark that we really need to focus on is known as the Spriggan Dig. After the calamity, Spriggans converged on this area in search of corrupted crystals in such numbers that the place became their dominion. However, in the last 5 years since, they have devoured almost every crystal, leaving the place a bare wasteland. So I guess that's actually also part to the Spriggans, why there's really nothing left growing here. I suppose that if maybe enough crystals were left around, perhaps it could have gone back to life, but it's hard to say because crystals can be pretty funny that way. Okay, so going a little bit away from the Standing Courses, we have Sorrel Haven. Sorrel Haven takes its name from the fallen sorrel leaves, a common herb found throughout the Black Shroud, but in abundance in this particular area, which has turned the damp forest floor into a distinctive purple-brown. So here is actually a pretty dangerous area, so it's really recommended that you have to be at least a level 30 to be able to go around this area if you don't want to get killed. So definitely not for new players. Here we have 3 specific areas. We have Hawk Manor, the Sanguine Perch, and Hopesea Pond. Let's start with Hopesea Pond. It's formed where a fragment of Dalamud left a fracture in the ground. Due to an overwhelming earthen aspect in the area, the flora around the pond's banks have grown at an unnatural rate. So you can actually get a good look at this area too, which is kind of dangerous if you actually see our great big slimy friends here. It's a very popular place for morbals, and I gotta say, out of all the Final Fantasy games that I've played, these morbals are probably the most terrifying. But moving here, we have the Sanguine Purge. The Death Gaze has made Sanguine Purge their roost when they came to the Twelveswood, though from where, no one knows. By all accounts, they have turned it into a nightmarish scene by hanging the flesh of their prey among the branches for keeping. So please, it's a really good idea if you just be careful around here. And finally, we have Hawk Manor, or I guess you could think of it as the Haunted Mansion. So, long frowned upon the people of Gridania as a symbol of access, the Seedseers would finally submit to pressure from the citizenry, selling the deed to the manor to Lady Amandine of House D'Articourse. The word hawk is of ancient Paja origin and means to speak without words. So this was actually built in honor of some Seedseer probably years ago. It was really more of a place for reflection and a place of continue to bond with nature. But the people didn't like it because it was seen as a waste of resources. So it was eventually sold off to Lady Amandine, who, let's just say the house had fallen into disrepair under her hand. Okay, so that's 3 places already taken care of. Now let's go on to the other 2 places. Let's start with Green Tier. Let's move on to Green Tier first, and then we'll cover Bent Branch, which is the largest area. So with Green Tier, it's in this northeastern part of the Shroud. It's just beyond the waters of the East Vein. Green Tier is a stretch of forest within the elementals have permitted men to harvest timber. As such, the air is always thick with the sound of woodcutters chopping and sawing. So here we actually have 3 specific places to look into. First off is Gabinnock's Brower. It's a small cabin for loggers off the Botanist Guild, and Gabinnock's Brower takes its name from the woodcutter's hard-working overseer. Which is really nice because they actually named this particular house after one of their workers. Now that's how you know that you're doing something right. Okay, next up is Naked Rock. It's a section of cliff face that's fallen away to reveal the rough surface beneath. Naked Rock is a nest for various raptors. In fact, many a traveler has stumbled upon or into only after it was too late. This place is also pretty popular for specific tests by the Lancers Guild. So just keep an eye out for the raptors and you can actually take a look at Naked Rock right up here. And finally, we have Spirit Hold. It's a structure initially built in the days of Gilmora. Spirit Hold has found new use as a prison to hold enemies of the forest while they wait judgment, though whether the same can be said after the calamity is unclear. Some also refer to the crumbling ruin as the Warden's Hold, after the cell's first jailer. Yeah, so this particular place, again, was once part of Gomorrah, but they used it temporarily as a way to hold prisoners as they waited judgment, probably either to be free or maybe sentenced to a worse fate, but after the calamity, it seems that a bunch of Voidsent ended up moving in, so it was pretty much left to ruin. Okay, so that's everything that we have in Green Tier. Let's move on to Bent Branch. So it is the largest area, it's like right here in the center. With a name describing the crooked intersection of 2 trade-heavy thoroughfares, Bent Branch is the starting point of the fur line, which winds its way northward to Coworthless, and the lumber line that proceeds to Thanalan in the south. So just think of it as the crossroads. So the main part of Bent Branch, in fact the main part of the entire Central Shroud, is Bent Branch Meadows. Once Moogle's Gift Mounts was established and the rookery stocked with Ishgard's finest birds, it was not long before an entire settlement had grown up around the stables. The trademark balloon tethered to the main building is actually an Exile war vessel claimed by Chocobo Keeps after it became entangled in a nearby tree and was abandoned by its riders. So this particular place was built as kind of like a home for the lumberers, as well as a trading point, and also stables for being able to raise chocobos, because this is actually a really nice place to be able to raise such fine birds. And eventually a small town, or I guess a settlement really, just sort of built up around it. It's also where the main aetheryte for the Central Shroud is, and it really is a wonderfully peaceful place to live. So if you want to live in communing with nature and maybe away from more of the busier parts of the city, this would probably be a good place to come to. So listing off the rest of the landmarks, we have the first one, which is Galavent's Spire. This watchtower takes its name from Galavent the Dominator, a ruler during the later days of Gomorrah. Legend has it that he could slay 10 Exali with one thrust of his great polearm. Kinda sounds familiar, that name. After that, we have the Matron's Leth. As if forgotten by Nofika herself, one mighty tree root endures upon a sheer cliff created by the geological upheavals of the Calamity. As this allows for passage upwards, the Gridanians have seen it as a blessing and take it to calling it the Matron's Leth. So I'm sure that you've actually seen this particular route before. So it is possible that you can just climb up this gigantic route all the way to the upper parts of the Central Shroud, which include the Standing Courses and Sorwell Haven. Here we have the Mirror Planks. It's a pier built by the fishermen who earn their livelihood on the lake. Known as the Mirror Planks, it also serves as logging convoys. Also, it is one of only 2 places, the other of which is in Gridania, that adventurers can actually ferry across the lake to reach their residential districts. Over here we have what's known as Lilystone. It's a boulder appearing suddenly upon the mirror, and Lilystone is named for the water flora that sprouts in abundance nearby. Nothing really to actually say about it, but it is a really pretty place. Okay, just 2 more landmarks left, but we saved the best for last, the first of which is the Tamtara Deepcroft, so I'm sure that you recognize it from the dungeon name. It once served as the underground burial site for Gilmorans, and it still serves the people of Gridania even today. It has also gained renown for the final resting place of Galvon the Dominator. So that's where I heard this name before. And finally, we have Everscade and the Guardian Tree. This is probably considered to be the most sacred place in the entire Shroud. Having seen over 1,000 summers, the Guardian Tree is supposedly the oldest arbor in all the Black Shroud, and home to the Great One, an elder elemental who watches and presides over the forest's entire denizens. The fruit borne by this particular tree also resembles a plum, and apparently it's sought after the 3 great continents for its curative purposes. Which actually makes a lot of sense because a lot of Paija come here to start their training in the form of white magic. So a lot of healing magic probably goes on around this particular tree as well. Okay, so that's everything that we kind of need to know about the Central Shroud. Just a very basic history as well as the landmarks that are in this particular area. And with that all taken care of, let's move on to the second location, which is the East Shroud. So for some very basic information on the East Shroud, it's the western edge part of the East Shroud that sits near Gridania proper and is in the center of the city-state's thriving apicultural industry. Its eastern sections are the home of the Sylphs, plant-like beastmen, many of whom do not take kindly to the presence of trespassers, and one can even find a Garlean stronghold in the southwestern edges of the East Shroud, a feat of Imperial engineering completed shortly before the Calamity. Alright, so for this particular location, it is also separated into 5 different areas. We have the Honey Yard, 9 Ives, Larkscall, the Sylphlands, and the Bramble Patch. So some of these places are definitely bigger than others, some have more landmarks than others, but let's go ahead and start here with the Honey Yard. So the Patoya of blossoms in this area makes it the ideal locale for beekeepers to set up their wooden hives. Unfortunately, the Honey Yard also draws all manner of fiends hungry for honeybees and their golden syrup. In this particular area, we have 2 landmarks. We have Sweet Bloom Pier and Full Flower Comb. Starting off with Sweet Bloom Pier, bordering on the Whispering Gorge, Sweet Bloom Pier serves as a port of call for the ferry traveling to Gridania. Waiting passengers can enjoy the sights of countless wildflowers and the scent of nectar wafting in the air. So this is actually a ferry that could take you directly to Gridania as well, just outside the Lancers Guild in case you were curious. The other landmark is known as Full Flower Comb. Led by Rosa Hawthorne, the beekeepers of Full Flower Comb have gained renown for the excellent honey and beeswax their hives produce. So not really too much else is here in the Honey Yard, just a ton of wildflowers, and it's usually very peaceful, but kind of like how I said before, it does tend to draw creatures to try to steal the honey, so you might want to watch out. Next up, we move into the area known as 9 Ives. It's as the name would suggest, 9 Ives is known for the many species of ivy found in the area. The Order of the Twin Adder have increased their presence in the area, keeping watch for both encroaching Sylphs and Garlean forces. Now, if you remember the name Rosa Hawthorne, the one in charge of the Full Flower Comb, we also have the Hawthorne Hut, named after the legendary Hawthorne, Scourge of the Mountains. This hut is home to the current generation of the family. Roloff, the patriarch and retired adventurer, welcomes adventurers into a small cottage so that he might enjoy their company and tales. So as of right now, we have a small family of the Hawthorns. Rosa Hawthorn takes care of the honey yard, and her husband here is retired and he takes care of the hut here, which is in the direct center of the East Shroud. It's also where the main aetheryte is. They also have at least one child. We have a daughter who's usually seen here cooking about at the stove. It's a really welcoming place where people can actually stop, rest, share tales with Roloff before they continue on their way. Right next to it we have Jocelyn's Spire. Both Wood Whaler and God's Quiver are stationed in the strategically located watchtower, named for a legendary captain of the Whalers. Not really too much else to say here except that it's directly above the Hawthorn hut, and so it's pretty difficult to miss. The Wood Whalers and even the God's Quiver do keep watch on this particular spire, most likely to keep watch over Baelsar's Wall. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But moving a little bit more to the east, we have Emerasak's Spire. Built in the haste to monitor the Garlean forces who recently marched on the Twelveswood from the northeast, this spire is Gridania's newest watchtower. It takes its name from a leader of the Gold Bulls who perished in the Battle of Carteneau after engaging in the Imperial army without any regard of his own safety or well-being. So this particular spire was definitely built shortly after the wall was constructed at Baelsar's Wall, right before the Garleans started their march towards Gridania. So like I said, this particular spire is the newest out of several spires that are strategically placed all over the Shroud. Its purpose is specifically to watch over Baelsar's Wall, or also Castrum Oriens. Behind this Garlean outpost stands Baelsar's Wall, and behind that lies Gyr Albania, a region of the imperially occupied Alamigo. So this particular spire was built strategically to keep watch over the newly constructed Baelsar's Wall, or Castrum Oriens. One would think that the wall is actually the limit of Gridania's border, which it actually isn't. The limit to Gridania's border with Alamigo is actually at the Vidonana River, which is beyond the wall. So they're actually encroaching upon Gridania's territory, so it really isn't a surprise that the people here are pretty worried about the whole thing. Well, that's one threat in the East Shroud. The second one is belonging to the Sylphs. Now, we have two different types of Sylph beast tribes. One of them, of course, lives in the Sylphlands, but the other is the much more friendly one in Little Solace. Little is the solace granted to those Sylphs who would voice their opposition to the summoning of the Lord of Levin. Little is the solace bequeathed upon those who would abandon their homes in the Sylphlands and shun their frenzied brethren. Thus, it is only by leaving their homes behind that the Sylphs may ultimately find solace, however little it may be. I think there are a lot of jokes made about the name, but yes, this is where the Sylphs who did not want to be bound to Lord Ramuh have come to make their home. So it's very much at the borders of the Sylphlands. So technically, they could still go back if they wanted to, but most of their brethren is under the influence of Lord Ramuh, so they won't be able to risk going back home without being tempered, at least not for the near future. But between Little Solace and the Sylphlands, we have Larkscall. While the songs of the namesake's birds do fill the air, Larkscall is a buffer betwixt Gridania and the Sylphlands. Adventurers and travelers are to enter at their own peril. So this particular area is technically within the Sylphlands, but not 100%. It's pretty much at the very borders of both the Shroud as well as the Sylphlands themselves. Now, you are free to enter here if you want to risk running across a tempered Sylph. They're very easy to spot, they're the purple ones, and it's really not a good idea, especially for new adventurers, to really venture beyond these points. However, if you look around, you can definitely see the few remains of Garlean technology scattered here and there from even before the calamity. Alright, so since we talked so much about the Sylphlands already, let's go ahead and explain more about that particular territory. The domain of the beastmen of the Black Shroud, the Sylphlands are filled with the touched followers of Ramuh. Hostile to outsiders, these thralls are of the wizened primal that fostered poisonous mushrooms to protect the region, driving the environment to the precipice of cataclysm. In other words, they're so determined to protect their home from outsiders, they're accidentally starting to poison everything around it. The problem is that they don't realize what they're doing because, again, they're tempered, and so their minds are not really open to reason. But in this particular area, we have 4 landmarks, which are really important to the Sylphs. The first one is known as Moonspore Grove. In this swath of the Sylphlands grow moonspores, gargantuan fungi that purge foul elements from the air. And you can actually see that more with this giant mushroom. The Sylphs are known for actually leaving this place to kind of rot here and there, so the other Sylphs do try their best, as well as enlisting adventurers, to try to keep this place as healthy as possible. Next up is the seedbed. It's illuminated in the soft glow of countless moon spores. The seedbed is an ancient arbiter nursery used by the Sylphs to grow and incubate their offspring, also known as podlings. So the Sylphs don't have parents, so to speak. They're actually born from pods, kind of like flowers. And in this particular place, it's a nursery, so you can actually see the pods hanging here all around us. They hold baby Sylphs. So in this place, they are kind of incubated, they're protected, they get plenty of sunlight usually. It's actually close to twilight in this particular time of the day. But this place is very important for helping to ensure that the next generation of Sylphs are born safely. Next up is the Gold Leaf Diet. Sylphkind fashioned the Gold Leaf Diet that they might hold gatherings and celebrations. I really don't think that it's used too much anymore because of Lord Ramuh's presence and ended up tempering a lot of the Sylphs, so it's kind of abandoned for the most part. If they do hold any kind of meetings here, it's probably more of the worship of Lord Ramuh. And finally, we have the Hanging Barbs. One can find the curiously dwelling of the Sylphs precariously suspended from tree limbs in the Hanging Barbs. So we actually have 2 versions of these particular hanging homes. One of them is in Little Solace, which are very friendly looking. You can actually tell it looks like everything there looks much smoother, much calmer. Here you can actually see it's actually much more jagged, much more pokey, I guess you could call it. Which does make sense because of the natures of both sets of beast tribes. One that's temperate and one that's not. One that is reasoned and one maybe not so much. Okay, and finally let's go on to the last area here in the Bramble Patch. By reputation, the mighty thorns of the Bramble Patch are a playground to the Muggles. Indeed, they seem to enjoy provoking the local beastkin and trends and watching the chaos that ensures as the creatures attempt in vain to pursue the mischief makers into the patch prickly depths. So, the Muggles tend to make this particular place their home. You don't really see too much of them because their village is hidden. We've never actually been to their village. I am actually hopeful that we actually get a chance to see what it looks like at the very least. But otherwise, you want to be careful because we have thorns like the size of swords or daggers in this particular place. So you really need to be careful because it's all too easy to get skewered. And last but not least, we have the Sanctum of the 12. This skyscraping ivory cathedral was built following the Age of the Endless Frost. It's a dark period in which the realm was overrun with famine and disease. It served as a place of refuge and respite for all those who sought succor. Soon after, however, it fell into ruin and was all but forgotten, until the advent of the 7th Umbral Era saw need for its rise once more. So all across Eorzea, they have shrines, statues, temples, all devoted to the gods. However, for almost all of them, they're really devoted to just one particular god of the 12 in general. What's so special about this place, however, is that you can come here and pray to any one of the 12. So it's not like this is home for specifically Lim Lane or Nofika. Here, it's all about worshiping the 12 as a whole. If you have a particular god that you want to pray specifically to, that's okay as well. However, ceremonies of eternal bonding also take place here. So this is where you actually get to come, where you can celebrate with your friends, your family, and actually get married to your significant other. Or a divorce if you have to. I'm not judging. So yes, that is everything that we need to know about the East Shroud as well as the Central Shroud as well. So I hope that you all enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. I had planned on trying to get the entire Shroud out before Endwalker, but for some reason these videos are pretty demanding, so I'm afraid I won't be able to put up part 2 just yet. However, when I do put it up, I will be covering both the North Shroud, the South Shroud, and even the Lavender Beds in the next video. So I hope that you're all looking forward to that then, and that you enjoyed this particular video until then. So until next time everyone, this is Fantasy Girl signing out.